On the high stone where we slept, the wind had teeth, and it bit noses and ears and toes until we curled around one another like the tight shells the river brings when it is swollen and happy. We didn't have blankets. We had our arms and legs and our hair, and we had each other. When the new light slid across my mother's cheek, I could see the little lines beside her eyes and the dust where she rubbed it to keep the tiny flies away. My own nose had dust, too. It was always there, the smell of ground and salt and the damp from the river far below. If I tell you we had words, you won't picture them right. No long words, no names that sit inside your head like rocks. Our words were hands and eyes and throats and chests, they were whistles and little clicks made at the side of the mouth, hums you feel more in your bones than your ears. When I tell you that I called my mother mother, what I mean is the lift of my chin and the high note that always made her turn faster than the others, even if she was carrying a baby or a stone. What I mean is the feel of her palm on my head when I pressed against her hip, and the way her fingers drummed a rhythm on my shoulder that said, I know, I see you. We had calls for vultures and calls for cats, calls for water and the quiet sound that told everybody to make themselves quiet, and we had the laugh, which was for everything too big to fit inside the other sounds. We slept on the rock because the rock watched over the grass, and the grass was full of things that watched back. If you have never heard the big cats call in the dark, I can tell you it is like a hand runs along your spine and squeezes each bone in turn. You hold very still when the sound moves, and you move when it stops. We knew where the trees leaned out from the stone and where you could hide your feet so they wouldn't be seen by eyes at the bottom. We knew to keep the little ones between bodies when the moon was small. On nights when the great cats were quiet, the hyenas laughed, and the hyenas sounded like people laughing from far away, like a joke you couldn't hear but felt anyway. When the sun came up more and the wind let go, the world smelled green, and the river sent up its wet breath. Down there, toward the bend where the fig tree held long shadows, we would go, all of us, like beads on a line that my mother took hold of and kept moving. I was never first, and I was always trying to be first, and this is the trouble of being the smallest not baby. There was old man with scar, who had a knee that made a dry sound when he squatted and a line like a broken river across his cheek, and he carried the best stones because he always found the best places to gather them. There was Big Laugh, who could smack his chest until the sound echoed off the cliffs and used that same arm to throw a rock exactly where he wanted it to go. There was my sister, Long Eye, whose eyes saw farther than anyone's, and who once touched a snake with 2 fingers and did not get bit because her fingers are quick and lucky, and because she knows how to move slow and still as falling dust when she wants to. We were hungry the way animals are hungry, not all at once but always, a tide that goes out and comes back and goes out again. Food was roots and berries and the sweet beetle grubs that live in rotten wood. Food was ostrich eggs when we found them and the seeds we shook from the dry heads of the grasses, and food was the fat that shines inside bones if you can get the bone open. The best bones come after the big cats take the meat and lie with their faces in the shade, bellies round, and their long teeth pink from it. When the vultures make their round circles in the sky and the hyenas are watching 2 ways at once, we would go closer. We have ways to look big. We have ways to shout without sound. We have hands to throw stones, and we have legs to run if our hands and our shouts do not make enough space. Old man with scar taught me how to hit one stone against another. He mostly let me watch, with my mouth open, which makes your lips dry and your teeth dusty. There is a way to see a stone and know that inside it there is a sharp edge. He would turn the round piece in his palm as if listening, and then bring the heavy one down with a sound like the sound of a far storm when it first begins, a crackle and pop that slid along the air. A piece would jump away, thin and bright, with an edge so clean that the first time I touched it, I bled without knowing how. He leaned over and sniffed the cut and made a low sound of approval and pressed his thumb along the edge of the flake to show me how a good one feels. After, when it stopped stinging, I liked the red line on my finger because it said I had said yes to the stone. We came to the open bone in the mid-light, when the insects were loud and the shadows were small. Vultures hopped as if they were too heavy for their feet, craning their long necks to look at us with round eyes that had no eyelids, as if they never slept. Flies rose like smoke and then settled again. The smell was thick and sweet and not a bad smell, not to me, because it meant food. Big laugh through the first stone, loud enough that one of the hyenas stopped laughing and snapped its jaws together like a door. The cats were already gone, lying in the cool shade of the thorn tree, licking the insides of their mouths and leaving not much but the legs and the long bone that only a rock can open. Old Man with Scar stood with his feet apart and his eyes not on the bone but on everything, while my mother and Long Eye and the others went forward like water moving in from many sides. I was allowed to bring a small rock and to watch the ground. I watched the holes in the dirt where the snakes live and the grass that is too still, which means something is holding its breath there. I watched the sky and told myself the vultures wouldn't fall because I have never seen one fall, and that made me brave enough to be close to the leg when Old Man with Scar knelt and began to tap and then to strike and then to hit with both hands. When the bone cracked, the sound was like a tree branch breaking but thicker, and when he put the broken end toward me, I could see the shining inside. It looked like the fat in my mother's hair when she rubs it with a stone after a hot day. He pushed the end with the flake, careful, and the white came out in a smooth piece that looked like the moon when it is a long thin smile. It was heavy on my tongue, and it tasted like everything good you forget in between times of eating it. It made the inside of my cheeks grow wet. My belly made a sound. I laughed a little because it made me think of the time Big Laugha's belly made a growl so loud it frightened a monkey into dropping fruit. The dry came a little stronger each day, and the river moved back from us the way shy animals do. When the wind blew, it picked up the light earth and put it in our eyes and hair and between our teeth. We went to the termite mounds, which are tall as a person if the person is sitting. The soldiers came out with their heads high, their mouths open, and they clamped down on skins and on the ends of sticks. We licked them off and they were not sweet and not bitter but they were crunchy and they filled the space in our mouths and then the space in our bellies a little. We found lizards sleeping on the warm stones, and when they ran, I ran, and if I ran well and long enough, sometimes I ran true and my hand closed on a tail that came off and wriggled like it was a separate animal. I learned to let the tail go and keep my eyes on the main part. The first time I caught the main part, Long Eye smiled with her whole face. She gave me a piece of the belly, and then, because she had that way, she tickled me under my arms until I squealed and a hyena turned its head and Old Man with Scar frowned and we remembered to be quiet again. Night brought thunder, but sometimes not rain. The thunder came with light that cut the sky into black and white pieces and then left it whole again. One night the light touched the ground and the ground caught it. The grass on the far side of the bend glowed orange and then danced as if it had its own legs, and the smoke lifted up and brought a new smell, a hot sweet smell like cooked seeds. We watched the animals run long before it touched the trees where the monkeys sleep. We watched the cats stream away, close to the earth, their shoulders rising and falling like waves, and then we watched the antelope, and then the boar with his stiff tail that points where he is going. We moved, too, because you always move when the animals move. The wind changed and the smoke came toward us, and we found the line where the hot had passed and the ground under our feet was black and soft. In the morning, with the ground still warm in places, we dug and found roots that had been in the heat but not the flame. They were soft in a way that a root is never soft, and they were sweet like the memory of fruit, and we ate until our teeth felt smooth and our jaws were tired and our bellies heavy. We did not carry the fire. It went away from us like a bird going somewhere we could not go. It was then that the elders began to talk with their eyes. The river was low and it made a sound like a whisper. There were more of the dry days than the green days, and the herds made longer lines when they walked. To one side, the earth cracked into wide mouths that sometimes swallowed the feet of the very young and took the smell of water and put it in the air without giving the cool. We followed the lines of the animals, even the ones we never touched, because the hooves and the long legs know where the grass will find a place to be green when nothing else remembers. That morning, my mother said the sound that means keep close and also the one that means listen, and she made us hold our breath until our ribs hurt. We heard the same sounds in others that were not us. A group stood with their faces toward us, their hair and eyes the same as ours and not the same, their feet dusty, their skin rubbed red with earth like ours and like the rocks we came from. We stopped, and we held our hands away from our bodies to show we had only stones and sticks. In this way, and with the respectful turning of our faces toward the ground, and Big Laugh laying his stone where the others could see it and Old Man with Scar dragging his foot to make the long line that means we go this way beside you, we became a bigger group. The tall woman with the piece missing from her ear looked at my mother for a long time, and my mother looked back, and whatever passed between them was not ours to know. It made me stand straighter, as if my head had suddenly grown heavier. They were like us in 100 ways. The children climbed and fell and climbed again and laughed when they were not supposed to. The men made the little huffs through their noses that mean the joke is better if it is quiet. The old ones watched the spaces between trees more than anything else. They had a man whose 2 front teeth made a gap when he smiled, and when he smiled, you could not help but think your own mouth wanted to smile. He showed me how to put the stone I had under my foot when I cracked small nuts and kept my fingers whole instead of smashed. He smelled like the inside of a baobab, green and sour and good, and I thought he was strong like a tree, and he walked near my mother because there are smells and the way bodies move that tell you when someone wants to be beside someone else. When we left the rock for the last time, we left little things to say goodbye to it. Long I put a piece of shell in the crack where she hides cool things. Old Man with Scar spit on his hands and rubbed them on the high part where the owls sit at night. Big Laugh made his chest sound soft, and then he pressed a little thumb-sized stone into the dust until half of it was hidden and half of it was seeing. I put my cheek to the rough place where my face had never been scratched in my sleep because the stone was the kind of mother that does not scratch. We didn't carry our fire because we didn't have any. We carried the sharp edges of stones and the round stones that make the sharp edges. We carried grubs and nuts and a piece of root that still smelled sweet enough to make your mouth wet just from thinking of it. We carried the tiny ones and the hurt ones and the water in our bellies. On the first day we followed the river until it went left and went into shallow water that made my ankles cold and my feet soft where they had grown stiff from the dry. My mother changed the way she walked so that her feet were careful and her eyes were not on the sky. Our group went long, like a line of ants when they carry a dead grasshopper and they all want to have a piece of it in their mouths. We put the small ones to the middle and the tall ones at the back. The new man with the tree strength walked where the water was deeper, and Big Laugh was behind him, and they made a sound with their throats for each step, not words but a thread that kept us tied. The river looked sleepy from above, but it looked awake from within. When a log turned, my mother squeezed my shoulder so hard that I would remember the hurt and never take my eyes from the brown ripples that are not always soft. Eyes that look like stones were looking back. The first one he showed me, Old Man with Scar, only moved his chin. I had to learn to see it. The water breaks a little different around a head that looks like water. The belly in me made itself small. The others threw stones, each one where their hands knew to put it, and the stones made round holes in the water and the mouths closed, and when we stepped on the other side, the tiny ones were on rocks with their feet in the air to dry, and we all felt big without laughing. The hyenas watched from the grass, their heads exactly where your eyes don't see them until they move. The sun looked down and saw our backs and touched each knob of our spines. We found places where the land was skin pulled tight over bones. White stones lay like ribs. Sometimes there were black stones that shone like water when you hit them. They make edges so sharp that you think they are pieces of night that broke and stayed on the ground. I held one and cut a piece of root and made a line in my own skin by accident, and because the line opened without pain first, I cried out not from hurt but from surprise. Long I pressed the sides of the cut until it closed, and she put a paste of chewed leaves on it. She showed me my own face in a puddle and said the sound for "don't be silly," which isn't a sound at all but a way of moving your mouth. In the afternoon when the sun lies heavy and pushes everything down, we rested in the shade of a thorn tree. The thorns had white tips like bone. They made tiny snaps when the wind touched them. Monkeys watched us the way we watch cats, their mouths moving because their mouths always move even when they have nothing to say, which is never. One threw a hard seed and it bounced on my shoulder. I put the seed between two rocks and broke it open and ate the inside and showed the monkey the empty shell, and the monkey showed me its teeth and its bottom and then ran away, and the others made a noise like laughter at my expression. My mother gave me a piece of water stuck inside a plant, and when I put my tongue into it, there was a frog as cold as morning that slid over my teeth and away, and I spluttered and the frog jumped twice and sat there so still you would think he was a stone learning to be a frog. I liked him for that. The first ostrich egg was more round than the moon when it is full, and it felt both heavy and light in my hands, like my own head does when I am falling asleep. We found it where the grass is lower and the ground makes little waves. The ostriches had been near, their footprints round ovals with tiny claws at the front, and the smell was clean, like water that has sat in a new bowl. Old man with scar tapped the egg with the stone the way he taps bones, and when it opened, the inside was a single yellow that looked like sun trapped in a shell. He put it into a dug hollow with hot stones in it, and the yellow went from bright to bright and white to whiter, and when it was warm but not too hot, we dipped our fingers and let the smooth inside sit in our mouths and fill the places behind our tongues. I dropped my handful onto my thigh and the yellow slid like a snake and then stayed, and I tried to lick it all and ended up sticky and happy and full. We left the shell unbroken near the path, a thing for the eyes of those who walk after us. At night we moved to a high place where the wind cleaned us. The new people and our people made one dense patch of warmth, and the old ones sat with their backs against stone and their eyes open and nearly closed. The old mothers beat a slow sound with their palms on the ground, tuck, 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 and made stories in the air with the sound and with their fingers drawing lines on thighs and arms. The story that night was about times when the grasses did not stop until the horizon with the sun in it, and how the animals made lines so long that if you stood where the old baobab grew and looked to the left and to the right, you could not see the end of them. The sound had a hitch where the old mother would stop and suck air and then let it go in a way that made us know there would be a change. I felt the change before it came. I felt the new thing building inside the story, like the feeling in your feet when you stand on the stone just above the river and you know if you drop your weight the water will take you where it wants to. The new thing was this: we go with them. We go with them as long as the grass goes, and when it stops, we stop when it stops. If you think this idea is not new, then you do not remember how it felt before, when our circles were small and we moved in folds like a sleeping animal breathes. Big Laugh understood it with his whole chest. He did not sleep but sat with his palms open on his knees and looked in the dark where the stars are many and the big cat's voice comes up out of the grass. The new man with the tree strength slept with his shoulder touching my mother's shoulder. I didn't like it and I did like it, both at once, and I put my head on my mother's calf and held her with my hands the way a baby does even when you are not a baby. She laid her fingers on my hair and made the little click against her teeth that means hush and I see you, both together, and the next thing after that was the sun. We followed a bird that talks to people. It came and sat on a branch not far above our heads and made a chattering, insistent sound, and it tilted its head one way and the other and flew a short way and then came back when we did not follow. Watch her, Long Eye made with her hands, and Old Man with Scar made the soft danger sound, because sometimes the path of a loud bird is a snake on a branch or a leopard on a low limb. We went slow until the bird made a different sound and the smell of sweet came to our noses. The bees were there, buzzing like summer turned to sound, and their black and gold bodies made a cloud around the hole where the honey rests. We were not clever enough to take it the easy way. We are not bees. The new man made smoke with dry dung and a spark from stones, a little burst of ash that did not stay, because the wind took it away, but it was enough to make the bees lift a little, and we opened the hole with sticks and pushed our hands in and pulled out handfuls of gold that dripped and shone and covered wrists and forearms. The bees stung everywhere they could find on hairy places, my eyelids and cheeks and the tender part under my arm, and I yelled like a hurt dog and ran and fell and then ran again, and then we licked the honey from each other's arms and faces and shared it around and made sounds of astonished thankfulness. The bird took its fee in the wax we left behind. My face swelled, and it felt like someone else's face on my bones, and Long Eye said with her mouth that I looked like a baboon baby and I said the same about her and we laughed until the new man with tree strength put his hand over my mouth and made eyes at the grass. There is a cat that doesn't roar. It makes a noise like a child coughing. Its teeth are long like a dream of a tooth. It watched us from the top of a termite mound, and because we were many and holding stones, it only watched, and then it turned and slid away with its belly low, the long teeth flashing when it yawned once, as if bored. Later, a cat that does roar made noise on the far side of the ridge, and this time we did not laugh or play. We gathered the little ones and the ones who were hurt and moved higher, and we sat and talked with our noses and hands and made a wall around our sleeping place. Soft Eyes, who belonged to the new people and who had hair with silver in it that lit up in the sun, went to make water alone when the light was almost gone, and we heard a sound like the stone you throw into a thick bush when you want to make the little animals run. Then he came back with his chest marked by claws that had pressed but not opened. The marks looked like the fingers of a tree burned by lightning. We touched him there and rubbed his back, and the old mothers sang the low part of the song that fixes your breath when it is too big, and we put chewed leaves on him and we watched for night eyes until the morning picked us back up like a hand. We found a long, shiny stone in a place where the earth had cracks so the inside showed. It liked to split when you tapped it right, and it broke into pieces that cut all the way with so little push that you surprised yourself. Big Laugh made a sharp that would cut hairs if you looked at it, and Long Eye took it and drew lines on the hard stick that we sometimes used to dig and turned the stick into a point that hurt the ground more than my heel does when I stomp. This seemed like magic to me, and I watched with my mouth open again like a very small child. The new man with the tree strength laughed with his mouth closed and shook his shoulders at me, not unkindly. Sometimes there were things that sat there and were too big to make sense of. We came to a line of bones in the ground, a back and the long ribs and the heavy head that could eat a tree. They were old and gray and did not move. They made the ground feel full. We climbed around them and went quiet and touched the bones with 2 fingers and then 3 and then a palm, and the sound in our bodies changed to match the place. We dug in the dust around and found a tooth like a rock that has a secret. I pressed it to my cheek because it was cool, and then I held it out to the others and we smiled at the tooth and at one another in the wide way that opens the face all the way up. Everything was movement. There were frogs that move when the sun is high and ones that move when the shadows are long. There were snakes that slide more in the afternoon and ones that like the night. There were birds that always run and hardly ever leave the ground, and ones that sit in the branches like leaves until you look, and then they are gone. There were small deer whose legs are more like birds' legs, and big deer with spirals that catch on branches and make them shake loose leaves. There were men and women, we and not we, and we learned their faces as the moon went from nothing to big and back to nothing. The dried mud at the bottom of old waters was crisscrossed with lines and small holes where feet have pressed and then been lifted. Sometimes my heel fitted into a heel that had been there before and I felt as if I were in a game with an invisible child who had left his foot and gone on ahead. I did not like to stand in those holes for long. The wind made patterns on the ground like the ripples the river makes, and I had dreams that little fish could swim on dirt and get into your eyes. One day the ground spoke a different language under our feet. It boomed when we stepped, a hollow like a drum. That was the morning we walked to the place where the world cracks open and makes a wall too high to climb with hands and too smooth for goats. We walked along it, and the path led us past a place where the air was hot without reason, and there was a making of wolves in the scent. It tasted like metal. The grown ones kept moving at the same speed and only made the little sound in the throat that means we are hearing something that we cannot name but we will not let it touch us. Far away, there was a breath of smoke that was not the same as grass smoke. We did not go toward it. It had been many sleeps since the last rain, and our ankles were thick with the dust that builds where hair is not much. Even the old boars did not challenge anything. They went straight, with heads low, their tails set like reeds. Then, I don't know if it was my imagination, but it felt as if the ground under my feet was going somewhere. You know this feeling when you are on a tree that grows over a backwater and you are thinking about climbing down to the water but then you let go and you are already moving and cannot grip the bark again. That is what it felt like when I realized that all the animals we were moving with weren't just traveling between this tree and that rock, they were going away in a way I hadn't seen. The lines of antelope and zebra and those with high shoulders and long tongues made the dust jump and dance, and the sound of their feet together was the sound the sky makes at night when it decides to break the air apart for a little while. We climbed to a place of thorn that overlooks wide water, a place where the reeds are tall enough to hide the heads of the tallest, and we sat there for a long time because it was so much and because you must sit and watch when the big thing is bigger than the things you have seen. I saw birds I never saw before, long-legged, with beaks like knives that tucked themselves away and then flashed out, and birds that schemed the water with their faces and made lines on it like children drawing in wet sand. I saw the backs of crocodiles with plants growing on them like islands and bright flies drinking from their eyes. I saw hippos that rose and sank like the breath of the river itself. I saw the animals making their dark strings across pale land, and the strings went from one edge of the world to the other. Beside me, the new man with the tree strength clenched his hands and unclenched them, and he did not make any sound at all for a long time. Then he made the low hum that you make when you feel something you were waiting for. My mother echoed it without looking at him. Old man with scar flexed his fingers around his hammerstone, then set it carefully on the ground between his feet as if it is a thing that must be told to rest. The next day, we went down into it. The reeds made whispers and then small shouts when the wind changed its mind. The river broke into many lines that parted and came together again. The ground sucked at feet and made peace with them again. A stork stabbed a fish and tossed it back and made the sound of a laugh, and I tried to make the same sound and only made a choking noise that made long I slap my back. A crocodile lay with its mouth open as if sleeping, and I could see the birds cleaning the pieces of old dinners from its teeth, and I wondered if it was a game and if the crocodile would close its mouth and the birds would still be inside, but I didn't ask because 1, we do not have the asking words like that yet, and 2, the crocodiles are not the ones you want to ask. After we crossed the many waters, there were hills, round and brown like sleeping animals. There were places where the ground sent up small white flowers that tasted like nothing and then later like a little milk if you chewed a long time. There were trees whose bark made lines on your skin if you pressed it there long enough. The nights were colder and the air thinner and my chest learned a new way to do its work. My belly learned a new way to be hungry and then to be full again. On a day when the sky was pale all day and then the clouds came together in the middle like someone pinched the world between fingers, we found a stand of small figs and the figs were not yet ready but some had fallen and were soft and sweet and drowned in ants. We did what we always do, blow and bite and brush and spill and laugh, and we were full of sugar and ants and happy in our wrists and knees. That was the day I tripped over nothing, which is what my mother called it when you look at your feet later and there is only dust where your toe met something, and I fell and my knee made a hole in itself so the red came out and the place went purple around. I cried and I did not, and my mother put leaves there and the old mothers sang the little thread song, and later, as we went on, the small ones called me T-chick, which is the sound a partridge makes when it runs behind a bush and all you see is its tail. We say this when someone pops up and disappears, or when a person falls and gets up before they meant to. The call stuck to me, and I did not mind it. We lost nobody to the cats, not for a long time. They walked with us like shadows that are long but not too near. One evening, though, as we were looking for a place to climb and sleep, a big golden body flowed out of a bush and the bones and the moon together moved. An old man with scar made the sound and big laugh through and the new man with tree strength stepped forward and put nothing between the cat and the little ones except his arms. The cat's front paw lifted and fell in the same moment as the rock. The cat's eyes were wide and then narrow and then gone behind grass, and the rock lay with a little red line on its side that looked like a smile. We stood there and nobody breathed very much. My mother's fingers dug into my shoulder hard enough to leave half moons. The little ones were silent in a way that babies hardly ever are. On days when I think of that, I think that the big cats go away not always because we are frightening or because we have more numbers. Sometimes they go away because the moment is turning in our direction and does not let them have it. The long line of animals grew longer until it felt like the world was walking. We ate seeds that stain your tongue black and roots that taste like old rain. We found a dead fish left in a little pool and we made sharp tools and took the fish apart and shared it carefully, the way you share when the food is not the kind that comes again soon. The salt from the fish made our lips burn and our mouths water for hours. The baby I liked, the one whose mother had the missing piece of ear, learned to stand with hands on a good sloping rock, and when he laughed, his whole head tipped back and the sound went up. When his mother picked him up and he put his cheek against her collarbone, I felt it in my own cheek and had to press my face to my mother's shoulder so I could feel the same roughness, the same warmth. Sometimes, in the middle of walking, I would forget to look for snakes or holes and instead think of the rock we left. I would see it in my eyes as if it was in front of me, with its edges and the way the owl's white droppings made streaks down from their place. I would smell the dust of that morning and hear the tiny wing beats of moths that like the cracks that face east. My belly would get the feeling that a hand had closed around it, not hard but long, and it would be a little harder to put one foot after the other. Then the wind would bring the smell of water or the grunt of a hippo or the long calling that the cranes make when they circle, and my feet would remember themselves again. A day came when the sun rose behind a thin white veil and stayed there. The heat did not press, the light was kind. We climbed to a crest and the world fell away in front of us. If you could have seen it with my eyes, You would have seen the brown and green and dark gray of wet mud and bright silver where the sun hit a wide loop of water, and you would have seen the animals in march across all the places where land stands high and across the shallows where water forgets itself. You would have seen lines that doubled and tripled and then braided into thicker ropes, each rope made of legs and heads and movement. You would have felt under your feet the hum of all the bodies and the air that moves because the bodies move it. The old mothers fell quiet and kept their hands still. Big laugh made no sound. Old man with scar stood with his hands on his knees and head forward and his breath going fast, and he looked like a boy instead of a man for a moment, and the new man with the tree strength rested his knuckles on the ground and then lifted his face, and I saw his eyes water without tears, because water fell on the inside. I didn't know then all the places we would see. I did not know the smell of the heavy stones that sweat when you go deep between their sides. I did not know the sound of air in the bosom of the hills when the wind moves one way in the morning and the opposite at evening. I did not know the different laughter of hyenas that live where the clay is red, and that it is not the same as the ones that live where the sand is yellow. I did not know that fire could come up from one stone rubbing another if you know the way and have something dry to catch it, and that we would sleep with the orange light and the warmth on our skins and the big cats even more at a distance. I did not know that my mother would push a small one out of herself on a night with no moon, and that I would hold the small hands while the old mother sang and that I would smell the small head and think of acacia flowers. I did not know that the one I called the new man with the tree strength would carry the small one on his arm because my mother's arms were busy, and that he would teach me to walk without sound, and he would teach me to listen not just with ears but with chest and belly and feet. What I knew then, on that crest with the world moving as if it was a single animal, was that I loved the taste of marrow when it came up like moonlight from a bone. I knew the bite of cold river on ankles and the comfort of foot on warm stone. I knew the sounds in my mother's throat and the small creases beside her eyes. I knew the way Long Eye's fingers always knew what to do, even when the thing in front of them was new. I knew the shape of Old Man with Scar's knuckles and the dry scrape of his palm when it rubbed.